My mother accepted the Philanthropist of the Year award for the foundation I built from scratch. In her 10-minute acceptance speech, she thanked her husband, her son, the caterer, the floral designer, and the valet who parked her car. She never once mentioned my name. I just sat at table 12, next to a minor donor, and smiled until my face ached. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I went home, opened my laptop, and drafted my official resignation as executive director. Then, I scheduled an emergency meeting with the entire board of directors, attaching a 40-page report detailing every single project I had personally managed, every grant I had written, and every dollar I had raised. I hit send at 2:17 a.m. The foundation they treated as their personal social accessory was about to become an empty shell, and they had no idea they had just handed me the lighter and the gasoline. The next morning, the silence was deafening. My phone, usually buzzing by 7 a.m. with my mother's list of ideas or my brother's casual requests for favors, was dark. They hadn't seen the email yet. They were probably sleeping in, basking in the afterglow of their perfect evening, rereading the puff piece in the local society pages that had already been published online. The article featured a large glossy photo of my mother, Eleanor, holding the Crystal Award. My father, Richard, beaming beside her, and my brother Leo, standing just behind them, looking charming and roguishly handsome. I wasn't in the photo. The photographer had asked me to step out of the frame so he could get a clean shot of the family. My mother had just smiled and said, "Of course, Clara can direct the lighting. She's so good with the technical things." I wasn't a person. I was a stagehand in the production of their lives. The foundation, the Hawthorne Initiative for the Arts, was my creation. It was named after my grandmother, a painter whose legacy my mother had conveniently co-opted after she passed. Grandma Hawthorne was the real deal. Talented, gritty, and fiercely passionate. Eleanor had inherited none of her talent, but all of her desire for the prestige that came with it. I, on the other hand, had inherited her work ethic. For 8 years, I had poured my life into building the initiative, from a simple idea into the city's most respected arts nonprofit. I wrote the mission statement. I filed the 501c3 paperwork. I built the website from scratch, designed the logo, and cultivated a network of donors who believed in our mission. Or rather, the mission I presented to them. My mother's role was purely ceremonial. She was the face of the foundation. She would sweep into galas wearing a designer gown, deliver speeches I had written for her, word for word, and graciously accept praise for work she didn't understand, let alone perform. My father, a tenured professor of philosophy, treated the whole thing with a kind of detached amusement, calling it Eleanor's little project. He never once acknowledged that I was the one running it, the one working 60-hour weeks, the one who had secured the multi-million-dollar grant that put us on the map. And Leo was the family mascot. He used the foundation's letterhead to get internships he didn't deserve, and dropped its name at bars to impress women. He once borrowed $1,000 from the petty cash fund for a weekend trip to Aspen, and I had to cover it with my own money to prevent a disaster during our annual audit. When I confronted him, he just laughed it off. "It's for a good cause, sis," he'd said, maintaining the family image. The awards gala was supposed to be the pinnacle of our success. The Philanthropist of the Year award wasn't just some local honor. It was a nationally recognized prize. It was validation for 8 years of my sweat, my stress, my sacrificed weekends. I had written the application myself, compiled the portfolio, and prepped my mother for the interview with the selection committee for weeks. I'd even picked out her dress. As I sat at that back table, listening to the MC list our accomplishments, the after-school arts programs I'd designed, the artist-in-residence fellowship I created, the public mural project I oversaw, I felt a flicker of pride. He was talking about my work. Then he called my mother to the stage. She floated up there, a vision in emerald green, and took the award. She held it up to the light, her eyes sparkling under the spotlights. "Oh my," she began, her voice thick with practiced humility. "I'm just overwhelmed to be recognized for this work, which has been my absolute passion." I gripped the linen napkin in my lap, my knuckles turning white. The passion was mine. The work was mine. The success was mine. But the credit, as always, was hers. She launched into the speech I wrote, hitting all the emotional beats perfectly. But then, she went off script. She started thanking people. Richard for his unwavering support. Leo for being her inspiration. She thanked the board, many of whom I had personally recruited. She thanked a woman who'd catered one of our events 2 years ago. The list went on and on. With every name that wasn't mine, the air in my lungs seemed to get thinner. The room started to feel like it was tilting. She was erasing me. In front of hundreds of people, our donors, our partners, our city's leaders. She was deliberately, methodically, and smilingly erasing my entire existence. I saw Leo catch my eye from his seat at the head table. He gave me a tiny, pitying shrug as if to say, "What can you do? That's just Mom." And in that moment, something inside me didn't just break. It turned to ice. Pity. That's all I ever got. Pity and the privilege of doing all the work. I stayed for the rest of the speech, smiled through the standing ovation, and even politely clapped. But I was already gone. That night, back in my quiet apartment, the silence was a balm. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't pour a glass of wine. I sat at my desk and I worked. But for the first time in years, I was working for myself. The resignation letter was short, professional, and effective immediately. The 40-page report was my masterpiece. It was titled, Operational History and Management Record of the Hawthorne Initiative, 2016-2024. It was meticulously organized, with timelines, budget breakdowns, copies of my email correspondence with every major donor, and a clear, undeniable record of my sole strategic and operational leadership. I didn't write it with anger. I wrote it with the cold, hard clarity of a historian documenting a fallen empire. I attached it to an email addressed to the entire board of directors, with my parents, and Leo copied for good measure. The subject line was simple. Emergency board meeting request and formal resignation of executive director. I hovered my mouse over the send button for only a second. There was no hesitation, just a click. And then, a profound sense of peace. The first domino had fallen. I went to bed and slept for 8 solid hours, dreamlessly, for the first time in as long as I could remember. The first tremor hit at 9:04 a.m. It was a text from my father. "Clara, your mother is trying to reach you. She saw a strange email. Call her immediately." A strange email. That's what he called the document that represented my entire professional life. I ignored it. 2 minutes later, my mother called. I let it go to voicemail. She called again and again. On the 4th try, she left a message. Her voice was frantic, a stark contrast to the smooth, serene philanthropist from the night before. "Clara, what is the meaning of this? What is this novel you sent to the board? Are you trying to embarrass me? After everything I've done for you? Call me back this instant." Everything she'd done for me. The delusion was breathtaking. I saved the voicemail. Then came Leo. He didn't bother with a phone call. He sent a string of texts. "What the hell is your problem? Mom is freaking out. You're making us look like idiots. Did you get fired or something? Why are you being so dramatic? Fix this. Now. Fix this." The 2 words that had defined my role in the family for my entire life. Spilled milk, a failed exam, a fender bender, a looming financial audit. My job was to fix it. To smooth it over. To make it disappear. So they could continue their lives uninterrupted. I stared at his message, the entitled command of it, and I felt nothing but a distant analytical calm. I simply blocked his number. One less string. By 11 a.m., my inbox was a war zone. Board members were replying to my email, all of them confused, concerned. Mrs. Albright, the board chair and an old friend of my grandmother's, responded within minutes. "Clara, I've received your report. I am scheduling the emergency meeting for tomorrow at 3 p.m. via Zoom. Please ensure you are available. I will handle all communications with your mother." The efficiency, the respect in her tone. It was like a glass of cold water after years in the desert. She saw it. She understood. My mother, realizing I wasn't responding, escalated. She sent a frantic group email to the board, CCing me, with the subject line, "A terrible misunderstanding." In it, she tried to spin my resignation as a symptom of burnout and personal issues. She painted me as an unstable, overwrought subordinate who had unfortunately cracked under the pressure. "Clara has been a dedicated assistant," she wrote, "and we are all very concerned for her well-being. Of course, her report is exaggerated, a product of her emotional state. We will handle this internally." She was trying to discredit me, to turn me into a charity case before the board even had time to read what I'd written. But it was too late. I'd already provided them with the facts. 40 pages of them, complete with appendices and citations. She was bringing a knife to a gunfight, and I had just armed the entire room. I spent the rest of the day fielding calls from concerned donors who had been alerted by board members. I didn't gossip. I didn't badmouth my family. I was calm, professional, and direct. I simply stated that I had resigned for professional reasons and directed them to the board for any questions about the initiative's future. The ambiguity was more damning than any accusation I could have made. They knew something was deeply wrong. By evening, the first major donor, a tech CEO who had pledged $250,000 to our new digital arts program, had formally paused his contribution, pending the outcome of the board meeting. The news rippled through the donor community like a shockwave. The foundation wasn't just an empty shell anymore. It was starting to take on water. And I was the one who had pulled the plug. To truly understand why I didn't hesitate, you have to understand it wasn't just about the gala. That was just the grand finale of a death by 1,000 cuts. It was years of small, almost imperceptible dismissals that had hollowed me out. I remember one moment, about 3 years ago, with perfect clarity. We had just landed our first major corporate sponsorship, a 6-figure deal with a local bank. It was a huge win, one I had spent 6 months negotiating. I'd worked on the proposal through a bout of the flu, making calls from my couch while wrapped in a blanket, my voice hoarse. A reporter from the city's main newspaper wanted to do a feature on the foundation's sudden success. She came to the office to interview the team. My mother, of course, took the lead. She sat in the big leather chair in my office. She called it the foundation's office, while I sat in a smaller chair to the side, notebooks in my lap, ready to feed her the data points and statistics she could never remember. The reporter, a sharp young woman named Sarah, turned to me at one point. "And you are?" she asked. Before I could answer, my mother jumped in with a bright, patronizing smile. "Oh, this is my daughter, Clara. She's my right hand. Such a tremendous help to me. I honestly couldn't keep track of all the paperwork without her." She patted my arm. "My little organizer." The reporter scribbled it down. "Her little organizer." I felt my face flush. I had a master's degree in arts administration. I had single-handedly managed a budget of over $2 million that year. I wasn't her little organizer. I was the engine, the architect, and the entire maintenance crew. The article came out a week later. It was a glowing profile of Eleanor Hawthorne, the brilliant socialite who had turned her family's passion for the arts into a civic powerhouse. There was a lovely photo of her looking thoughtful and important behind my desk. I was mentioned once, in passing. With the help of her daughter, Clara, Eleanor has managed to... I cut out the article. I don't know why. I think I wanted a physical reminder of my own invisibility. Then there was the time Leo needed a character reference for a competitive job at a prestigious art gallery. He didn't ask me to write it. He just took a sheet of the foundation's official letterhead from the supply closet, forged my signature as executive director, and wrote a glowing recommendation for himself, full of lies about his instrumental role in our fundraising campaigns. I only found out when the gallery's HR department called me to verify some of the details. I was horrified. It was fraud. It could have jeopardized our nonprofit status. When I confronted him, my parents were there. Leo didn't even look ashamed. "What's the big deal?" He shrugged. "It's the family business, right? We help each other out." My father chimed in, adjusting his glasses. "Clara, don't be so dramatic. It's a minor transgression. He got the job. That's what matters. You should be proud of him." My mother's response was even worse. "You need to protect your brother, dear. That's what family does. We can't have this getting out. It would look so bad for the initiative." They weren't worried about the ethics or the legality. They were worried about the optics. My job wasn't to uphold the integrity of the organization I had built. It was to protect the family's reputation, even if it meant enabling Leo's deceit. I cleaned it up. I called the gallery back and smoothed it over, walking a tightrope of vague corporate speak to avoid outright lying while still saving Leo's skin. I felt sick to my stomach for a week. Each time, I swallowed the injustice. I told myself it was for the greater good of the foundation. I told myself it was what you do for family. But the truth is, I was just enabling them. The gala wasn't the attack. It was simply the moment I finally stopped being a willing victim. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for 3 p.m. the next day. At 2:55 p.m., I logged into the Zoom call from my kitchen table. I was wearing a simple black blazer and had my hair pulled back. I looked calm, composed. One by one, the faces of the board members popped up in their little squares. Mrs. Albright was there, her expression serious, but kind. Mr. Chen from the bank, Miss Davis, the lawyer, they all looked grim. Then 2 more squares appeared, my mother and father. They were in my father's study, the wall of leather-bound books behind them lending an air of false gravitas. My mother's face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed. My father looked deeply uncomfortable, like a man forced to attend a homeowners association meeting. Mrs. Albright began without preamble. "Thank you all for joining on such short notice. We are here to discuss the resignation of our executive director, Clara Hawthorne, and the contents of the report she submitted. Clara, the floor is yours." I unmuted myself. My voice was steady. "Thank you, Evelyn. As you all know from my letter, I have formally resigned my position. The report I sent provides a comprehensive overview of my work and leadership since the initiative's inception. I believe it speaks for itself. I'm here today to answer any questions you may have." Before anyone could speak, my mother unmuted, her voice trembling with barely concealed rage. "This is absurd. Evelyn, this is a private family matter, being aired out inappropriately. My daughter she's not well. She's been under a great deal of stress, and she's lashing out." Mrs. Albright held up a hand. "Eleanor, this is a board meeting, not a family intervention. The Hawthorne Initiative is a public trust, and Clara has raised serious questions about its management and public representation. We will proceed in an orderly fashion. Mr. Chen, you had a question?" Mr. Chen, a no-nonsense numbers guy, adjusted his glasses. "Yes. Clara, in your report, you've documented that you were the sole author of the grant proposal that secured our 3-year funding from the National Arts Endowment. My records show that Eleanor was listed as the primary author on the final submission. Can you clarify that discrepancy?" The air went still. I could see my mother's eyes dart towards my father. "Yes, I can," I said calmly. "I wrote the entire proposal. I managed the project budget, compiled the data, and wrote all the narrative sections. My mother reviewed the final draft and asked that I list her as the primary author for public-facing purposes. I have the original drafts, including the metadata and revision history, saved on my hard drive, should the board wish to verify." My mother gasped. "You wouldn't dare!" My father finally spoke, his voice layered with academic condescension. "Now, let's not get bogged down in trivialities about who typed what. The point is, the work was done. The funds were secured. This is a matter of collaborative family effort." "With all due respect, Dr. Hawthorne," Ms. Davis, the lawyer, cut in, her tone sharp. "Falsifying authorship on a federal grant application is not a triviality. It is grounds for the endowment to recall the funds. It constitutes fraud." A choked sound came from my mother's square. My father's face went slack. They hadn't considered that. They had only considered the prestige, not the legal consequences. Mrs. Albright's voice was like ice. Eleanor, Richard, did either of you have any operational role in the programs detailed in Clara's report? Did you manage the budgets? Did you hire the staff? Did you oversee the community outreach that has been the cornerstone of our public image? There was a long, painful silence. My father cleared his throat. We provided oversight and vision. My vision is what got us that award, my mother cried, her composure finally shattering. I am the face of the initiative. I am the one who brings in the donors with my charm and my connections. Clara handles the paperwork. That has always been the arrangement. So the answer is no, Mrs. Albright concluded flatly. You had no operational role. You were essentially figureheads. She turned her attention back to me, but her words were for them. Clara, thank you for your honesty and your impeccable record-keeping. It is clear to this board that you have been not just the executive director, but the heart, soul, and spine of this organization. We accept your resignation with the deepest regret. She then turned to my parents. Eleanor, Richard, in light of these revelations, the board is requesting your immediate and permanent resignation from all positions related to the Hawthorne Initiative. We will be issuing a public statement that the Foundation is going on an indefinite hiatus, pending a full organizational review and leadership restructuring. A formal letter from our legal counsel will be forthcoming. She clicked a button. My parents' square on the Zoom call vanished. She had removed them from the meeting. The rest of the board members just sat there, stunned into silence. I had done it. It wasn't a screaming match. It was a quiet, professional, and utterly brutal dismantling. I hadn't just resigned. I had taken the entire kingdom with me. The fallout was swift and spectacular. Mrs. Albright was true to her word. By 5 o'clock that evening, an official email went out to the entire donor and mailing list. It announced my departure and the Foundation's immediate hiatus, citing the need for a comprehensive review of our operational and leadership structure to ensure we can meet our mission with integrity moving forward. It was corporate speak for a complete meltdown. The phrase "with integrity" was a dagger aimed directly at my mother's public persona. Her phone must have started ringing off the hook immediately. The society friends, the other non-profit leaders, the wife of the mayor, all the people whose admiration she cultivated like a prize-winning orchid, would be calling, texting, whispering. What happened? Is everything okay? I saw the email. Her carefully constructed world of prestige was crumbling in real time. My father tried to reach me via email that night. The tone was no longer demanding. It was bewildered. Clara, I don't understand your motive here. You have destroyed your mother. You have destroyed something we built as a family. Was a simple thank you all you wanted? This level of vindictiveness is beneath you. He still didn't get it. He thought my work, my career, my identity was a commodity that could be exchanged for a pat on the head. He saw my actions not as a righteous stand for my own worth, but as petty revenge. I moved the email to the trash without replying. The next day, the real chaos began for Leo. He called me from a blocked number. The moment I heard his panicked voice, I knew why. Clara, you have to call them back. You have to fix this. Call who back, Leo? I asked, my voice devoid of emotion. The gallery. The job I got. They rescinded the offer. They said they were restructuring their partnerships. and my background no longer aligns with their institutional direction. That's bull. They saw the email about the initiative. You made me look like a fraud. I didn't make you look like anything, Leo, I said, the words falling like chips of ice. Your actions did that. You lied on your application. I just stopped covering for you. It was a white lie, shrieked. Everyone does it. You've ruined my career before it even started. Mom is a wreck. Dad won't come out of his study. You are tearing this family apart over one stupid award. It was never about the award, Leo. It was about a lifetime of being treated like a functionary instead of a person. You have a college degree. Get a job on your own merits for once. It might do you some good. I hung up before he could respond, and blocked that number too. The story started to leak to the press. Not the messy details, but the kind of vague, scandalous whispers that are far more damaging. The Society columnist who had written the glowing piece about my mother just days before now wrote a small catty follow-up item. A sudden shake-up at the Hawthorne Initiative has the city's philanthropic circle buzzing. After a triumphant win at the annual awards gala, the celebrated foundation has gone on an unexpected hiatus following the abrupt departure of its longtime executive director, Clara Hawthorne. Sources say the board is conducting a top-to-bottom review. One has to wonder what they're looking for. My mother, who lived and died by those columns, must have felt like she was being flayed alive in public. For a woman whose entire identity was built on public perception, having that perception turned to suspicion and ridicule was a fate worse than death. They had built their house on a foundation of my work, and I had just turned that foundation to sand. They were all sinking, and for the first time, I wasn't diving in to save them. I was on the shore, watching the tide roll in, and I felt for the first time truly breathtakingly free. This wasn't the first time they had asked me to make myself smaller for their comfort. It was a pattern woven into the fabric of our family. I remember when I was in college, majoring in art history with a minor in business. My father, the esteemed philosophy professor, would openly scoff at my choice of study at family dinners. Art history, he'd muse to my uncles and aunts, a smirk playing on his lips. A fine pursuit for a young lady with time on her hands. She can learn to identify pretty pictures. Perhaps she'll marry a wealthy man and help him decorate his mansion. He said it like a joke, and everyone would chuckle, but the condescension was real. He saw my passion as a frivolous hobby, not a serious academic or professional path. Meanwhile, Leo was studying communications, a degree he was barely passing. But when he spoke about his classes, my father would listen intently. Ah, rhetoric, the art of persuasion, a noble and practical skill, son. You'll go far. Leo was the investment. I was the ornament. The idea for the Hawthorne Initiative was born from my senior thesis, a detailed proposal for a modern, community-focused arts nonprofit. I showed the 100-page document to my mother, my eyes shining with excitement. I thought she would be proud. She scanned the executive summary, her eyes lighting up not at the mission or the community programs I'd designed, but at the potential for branding. Hawthorne, she'd said, tapping the cover page. The Hawthorne Initiative. It has a wonderful ring to it. So distinguished. In her mind, my academic work instantly became her new social project. When I graduated summa cum laude, my father toasted Leo for surviving his final exams. When I landed my first grant, my mother announced it at a dinner party as The good news I've been waiting to share about my project. They didn't see me. They saw a resource, a tool to be used. They were like prospectors who had stumbled upon a rich vein of ore and simply assumed it belonged to them. I think the quietest, most cutting dismissal came a few years into running the initiative. I had been working tirelessly on a partnership with the city's school district to bring art classes to underserved elementary schools. It was complex, involving bureaucracy, unions, and shoestring budgets. After months of work, I finally got the program approved. I came home late, exhausted but elated, and found my parents in the living room. "I did it," I announced, dropping my bag by the door. "The school program is a go. We start in the fall." My father glanced up from his book. "Oh, that's nice, dear." My mother looked at me, a slight frown on her face. "Clara, you look exhausted. You're working too hard on this little hobby of yours. You'll get wrinkles. Did you remember to call the caterer for the garden party on Saturday? I sent you the number." The school program, a project that would bring arts education to hundreds of children, was dismissed as a little hobby. My triumph was irrelevant next to the logistics of her upcoming social event. I felt a familiar cold wave wash over me. I just nodded, said, "Yes, I'll call them in the morning," and went up to my room. I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark and cried, not with big, heaving sobs, but with silent, hot tears of pure futility. Every success I had was theirs to claim, and every sacrifice I made was mine to bear alone. The gala wasn't a single event. It was the culmination of 1,000 of those quiet, soul-crushing moments. It wasn't that they forgot to thank me. It's that they genuinely believed there was nothing to thank me for. The week after the board meeting was a masterclass in emotional whiplash. The initial shock from my family curdled into a campaign of guilt and manipulation. My mother, having failed to discredit me professionally, switched tactics. She started leaving long, rambling voicemails, her voice thick with tears. She spoke of her heartbreak, her confusion, how she couldn't eat or sleep. She never apologized. She never acknowledged what she did. Instead, she framed my actions as a cruel, inexplicable betrayal against a loving, innocent mother. "I don't know what I did to deserve this, Clara," she'd weep. "I gave you everything. I just wanted us to be a team." We were never a team. A team implies mutual effort and shared glory. We were a queen and a worker bee. My father, on the other hand, tried to appeal to my logic, or what he perceived as my foolish sentimentality. He sent another email, longer this time. He wrote about the importance of family, of forgiveness, of not letting minor slights destroy the bonds of kinship. He explained my mother's behavior as a simple gaffe, an oversight born of the excitement of the moment. "Your mother is not a malicious person, Clara," he wrote. "She is merely accustomed to the spotlight. You, on the other hand, have always been the diligent one, content to work behind the scenes. It was a comfortable dynamic. Why you chose to detonate it now is beyond my comprehension." He was admitting it, right there in black and white. He saw the dynamic. He knew I did all the work. He just couldn't understand why I would suddenly refuse to accept it. To him, my demanding recognition was a disruption of the natural order of things. But the most surprising confrontation came not from my family, but from Mrs. Albright. She called me 3 days after the board meeting. I was nervous, expecting more fallout. Instead, her voice was warm. "Clara, I want to apologize," she said. I was taken aback. "Apologize for what, Evelyn?" "For not seeing it sooner," she said, her voice firm. "Your grandmother, my dear friend Catherine, she was a force of nature. She never let anyone take credit for her work. I saw so much of her in you, in your passion and your talent. But I also saw you letting your mother eclipse you. I stood by, and I watched it happen. I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere in family dynamics. I was wrong. The moment Eleanor accepted that award, without saying your name, I saw Catherine's ghost shaking her head, and I knew I had been complicit in my silence. Your report wasn't an attack, Clara. It was a declaration of independence, and I, for one, am proud of you." I had to sit down. Tears I didn't even know were there started streaming down my face. All these years, I had thought no one saw. I thought I was completely alone in my invisible work. But she had seen it. Someone had seen the truth all along. Her validation was a shield. It solidified my resolve. It wasn't me who was tearing the family apart. It was my family's pathological need for my servitude that had made the relationship unsustainable. I hadn't detonated anything. I had simply walked away from a structure that was already rotten to its core. The next day, I received a package via messenger. It was a heavy, flat box. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was one of my grandmother's smaller paintings. A beautiful, moody landscape of the coast. Attached was a note in Mrs. Albright's elegant script. "Catherine always said this one was about finding your own light in the fog. Thought it belonged with you. Now, what's next for you, my dear?" I hung the painting on the wall across from my desk. It was the first thing I saw when I woke up, and the last thing I saw before I went to sleep. It was a promise to myself. I would never work in the shadows again. The weeks that followed were filled with a strange, liberating silence from my family. The angry calls and manipulative emails stopped. I think they finally realized their old tactics wouldn't work. The foundation was officially shuttered. The website was replaced with a single landing page stating it had ceased operations. The Hawthorne Initiative for the Arts was dead. My mother's grand social enterprise had evaporated, leaving nothing behind but a trail of embarrassing whispers in the society pages. I, on the other hand, was starting to build something new. Mrs. Albright and a few other key board members who had resigned in protest with me had approached me with an idea. They wanted to help me start my own consulting firm, helping smaller grassroots nonprofits with grant writing, strategy, and development. All the things I did best. But this time, under my own name. Clara Hawthorne Consulting. It had a nice ring to it. They provided the seed money and their incredible network of contacts. Within a month, I had my first 3 clients. It was terrifying and exhilarating. The work was just as demanding, but the feeling was completely different. Every success was mine. Every bit of praise was directed at me. I wasn't anyone's right hand or little organizer. I was the boss. About 2 months after the gala, I was working late in my new small office space when I got an email from a name I didn't recognize. The subject was an apology. I cautiously opened it. It was from Leo's ex-girlfriend, a smart young woman named Chloe, who I had always liked. They had broken up shortly after he lost the gallery job. Her email was short and to the point. "Dear Clara," it began. "I know this is out of the blue, but I wanted to reach out. I'm sure you know Leo and I are no longer together. The reason I'm writing is because I feel I owe you an apology. For a long time, I listened to Leo's version of your family. He painted you as difficult, overly sensitive and jealous of his and your mother's natural charisma. He made it sound like you were the family burden, the one they had to manage. I believed him. After he lost the gallery job, the truth started to come out. He confessed everything. The forged letter, how you covered his debts, how you did all the work for the initiative. He wasn't upset about losing the job. He was furious that his safety net was gone. I realized then that you weren't the difficult one. You were the one holding everything together. I'm so sorry I didn't see it. I hope you're doing well. You deserve it." I read the email 3 times. It was like Mrs. Albright's call, but from a different angle. It was confirmation from within the blast radius of my family's dysfunction. It was proof that the reality I had asserted was, in fact, reality. They could spin whatever narrative they wanted, but the truth had a way of seeping out. Leo hadn't just lost a job or a girlfriend. He had lost the carefully constructed illusion of his own competence. My mother had lost her reputation. My father had lost his comfortable detachment. They hadn't just lost the foundation. They had lost the one person who enabled their collective fantasy. They were left with nothing but themselves. And it seemed they didn't much like the company. The silence from them wasn't peace. It was the sound of a vacuum. And I was no longer obligated to fill it. The lesson I learned wasn't something you find in a self-help book. It was stark and simple. You cannot force people to value you. You can only decide if you will tolerate being devalued. For years, I thought if I just worked harder, was more successful, more indispensable, that one day they would turn around and finally see me. I thought their recognition was a prize to be earned. But it was never on the table. Their family structure required an invisible laborer. My role was assigned the day I was born. The quiet, capable daughter who would make their lives easier and their images shinier. My visibility was a threat to their entire ecosystem. My mother's identity as a philanthropist depended on my invisibility. Leo's self-image as the charming prodigy depended on my invisibility. My father's peaceful academic detachment depended on my invisibility. The moment I demanded to be seen, I wasn't just asking for credit. I was challenging their very sense of self. It was a war I could never win by staying within their system. The only winning move was not to play. Starting my own consulting firm was the most concrete manifestation of this lesson. My name was on the door. My clients hired me for my expertise, not my family connections. I set my own hours, chose my own projects, and took full, unadulterated credit for my own work. My first big success was helping a small, struggling dance troupe secure a major grant that saved their season. The artistic director, a woman with fire in her eyes and paint on her jeans, hugged me with tears in her eyes. "You saved us, Clara," she said. "We couldn't have done this without you." And that simple, heartfelt acknowledgement felt more valuable than any crystal award my mother could ever polish. I learned that true value isn't bestowed by others. It's built within yourself. It's in the quiet confidence of knowing your own skills, the integrity of your own work, and the courage to demand that the world see you as you are, not as they need you to be. My family saw love as a transaction based on utility. I was loved as long as I was useful. The moment I withdrew my utility, the love vanished. It was a painful lesson, but an invaluable one. It taught me to seek out relationships, both personal and professional, that were based on mutual respect, not codependent need. My life became smaller, in a way. My circle was tighter, my ambitions quieter, but it was real. It was mine. And for the first time, it was enough. It's been almost a year now. A year of quiet growth, of healing, of building a life on my own terms. The silence from my family has been absolute. No birthday card, no holiday text. Nothing. It's as if the branch of the family tree I occupied was simply sawed off. And I have been okay with that. More than okay. I feel lighter. So if you're out there, feeling invisible, feeling like your contributions are being erased by people who are supposed to love you the most, please hear me. Your work matters. Your voice matters. You matter. Don't wait for them to see it. See it for yourself. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not to fight louder, but to simply stop participating in your own erasure. Build your own table instead of begging for a seat at theirs. It will be the hardest and best thing you ever do. Last week, something unexpected happened. A letter arrived at my office. It was addressed in my father's distinctive slanted handwriting. My first instinct was to throw it away. But curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. It was a single sheet of his university letterhead. The note was short. Clara, it read, I have been reading Marcus Aurelius. He writes, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. I have been thinking about that line a great deal in relation to you. I am beginning to understand. Dad, it wasn't an apology. It wasn't a plea for reconciliation. It was an acknowledgement. A cryptic, academic, perfectly Richard sort of acknowledgement. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was just telling me he was starting to see the obstacle he had been. The obstacle they had all been. I read it, folded it, and put it in a drawer. I didn't know what to do with it. It wasn't a bridge, but it was perhaps the first stone laid for a foundation of a different kind. Whether I ever choose to walk across it remains to be seen. For now, I'm happy on my own side of the river. I'd love to know what you think. Have you ever had to walk away from a situation where you felt completely unseen? How did you reclaim your story? Leave a comment below. Your stories give me, and so many others, strength. Thank you for listening.